executive replica loose collector Vampirella. This is going to start a 3-video series. Vampirella is so look, my association with Vampirella. Years ago, I used to buy Wizard magazine. I was really into comic books. Wizard was awesome. They used to sell it at the grocery store, and I would pick up the new issue every other month. Sometimes every month. I would miss an issue here and there, but that was the nature of it. I would go and I would help my grandma or help my mom or whatever do the groceries, and if I did that and I was cool and everything, sometimes they would buy me one of the magazines on my way out. Hey, that was the time. That was the time I was living in, okay? And that is when I discovered, through one of the Wizard magazines, that Vampirella was even a thing. That it was even a thing. I was shocked, to say the least. I was definitely at that time in my life where her outfit certainly caught my attention. And I was definitely at that point in my life when some other things caught my attention about her. But then they gave you a couple of free comics. And I read a couple of her books and was kind of taken aback. Like, comics were simpler things. They were superhero epics, and that's all they were. I know that comics have always been very diverse, but when you were a kid and you grew up and you got the comic books that your parents bought for you, or you knew comics by the comics that were sold on the regular store shelves, that's what you knew. You knew superheroes. Superheroes were on TV. Superheroes were what you saw on the store shelves. They were what was in the Walmarts and the toy stores. They were what was comic books. They were comic books. Now, getting Wizard magazine opened me up to the idea that there were other comics out there. But Wizard even focused an awful lot on, hey, X-Men movie coming out and so on and so forth. They were even playing up the superhero angle all the time. There was a superhero on every other page. So primarily, that's what I thought comics were. Pulpy action stories, superheroes, moving on with our lives. Then I read her. And she was something wildly different. It dealt with science fiction, with vampire lore, vampire hunting, dark imagery. Like, I remember one image where she takes a bath and like there's all this blood everywhere and everything like that. Like, it just, when my mind goes back to it, I know that had like an effect. I was like, this is like nothing else I'd ever seen in my life. But Vampirella, if you have zero context, is something that you don't just get into. See, Vampirella is one of those things where certain writers in the comics will take themselves seriously, and they will do serious storylines. But boy, let me tell you, Vampirella is cheesecake, fan service, adventure, craziness, sci-fi, and oftentimes is holding absolutely nothing back. Like, this character, okay, is, if I'm remembering this right, she comes from the planet Draculon, and a spaceship from Earth crash lands on the planet. And I think she was part of a race called the Vampiri, who send her out to investigate this crash. She finds humans, of course, in the crash, and blood flows in their veins. There's blood, which is a big deal because blood used to flow across the rivers and seas of Draculon, but has stopped, and the Vampiri are dying, so they're all kind of like starving to death and dying, if I remember this right. And Vampirella, she is able to take the spaceship, fly it back to Earth, and then kind of becomes like a good vampire. She's like a vampire, kind of like Blade, that hunts other vampires. But vampires are not the same thing in this continuity necessarily that they are in other forms of continuity, because vampires kind of specifically come from her planet. Like, it's wild. It's wild to sit here and explain it to anybody that would be serious about it. If you are serious about your vampires, this is probably not for you. If you are serious about your comic book lore, this is probably not for you. If you take things very seriously in science fiction and whatnot, this is probably not for you. Okay? It's probably just not. There is a level of forgiveness that you need to just open a book, see the cheesecake, have a good time, take it for what it is, go on the adventure, and step away, that you need to enjoy Vampirella. And you know what? I don't buy her regularly. She's not a regular purchase. I'm not out there looking for every issue. But I would be lying if I told you that I haven't actively looked for her books from time to time, and that I haven't just had a great time while just reading something that I can just kind of disappear into. What can I tell you? I like Frank Frazetta type women. There you go. I like vampires. There you go. I like action superhero comics. There you go. I like science fiction. There you go. And sometimes I like a stupid premise that just gets us off the ground and lets us go. There you go. And at the same time, I like serious storytelling, even if the rest of the story is kind of ridiculous. The story in its own right needs to make enough sense in its own universal context to keep my interest. There you go. I like it. And I have no reason to apologize for it. We're going to open the Loose Collector Executive Replica Vampirella. We're going to check her over. We're going to see what we think. Then on the next video, we're going to look at the Frazetta Girls Vampirella. Then on the next video, we're going to figure out which one I like the most. Let's get started. So, I'm going to start with the box, because we mentioned Vampirella. There's a certain kind of art here. There's a certain kind of look here that runs in the Vampirella series, the Vampirella comics, the Vampirella artwork. And you know what? When I was little, I thought that Vampirella was basically Elvira. I mean, I was wrong. I didn't realize that until I really started reading it, like I said. But that was the impression that I got off it back when I very first seen artwork like this. Artwork like this. Like this. And actually, there's part of that backstory right here that I was talking about, right here on the back. And it kind of says a lot of what I said. Also, right there. There's a logo. There's this. And that's her. That's the box. It's very simple, but there's something about the artwork of this character that is always very solid. Like, some of the absolute best artists do Vampirella pieces. And I mean, that's no exaggeration, as you can see what's on the box and what you'll see on the other one when we get to the Frazetta girls. But for right now, let's open her up. All right, there she is, Vampirella. Now, I went out of my way already and realized that one of her feet was kind of messing with me a little bit. I'm going to have to heat that up and pop it out. But for right now, I wanted to get this review, and of course, I like to do these first impressions and everything, so one of the things I decided was I would just grab one of the stands, because I don't want her falling over and everything like that while I'm trying to do this. And we'll just go from here. So, first off, this is her. Let's get this out of the way right now. They didn't skimp on the body. We have no lower ab crunch or anything like that. We have the double knees, so she has the kneecap kind of bend, but she only has the one elbow. You can get about this much range, which isn't bad. I've seen worse, but it's not great either, necessarily. She, of course, has solid T-pose that she can get out of this. And there's a lot of movement in the upper torso that tries to make up for the fact that you're not going to get a lower torso. The hips and everything are sculpted into one piece. There are these, she's wearing heels. That's part of the reason that I chose to do the stand. And her outfit is, there's not much for you to have to imagine about this character. There's her butt, there's her back, all of her back. The hair does not get in the way at all. Like, they chose to give it a lot of movement, but they kept it off of her shoulders in a way that really allowed for the maximum level of movement. Now, right here, she has this hand, which is kind of like this reaching hand, and the reaching hand actually has a gimmick where this little bat that she came with can actually slip onto her finger, and it can actually be right there, and then she can, like, hold it out and do stuff like that, which is actually kind of cool. Like, I gotta admit, that is a pretty cool effect. And it works in two different ways, too, because she could also turn her hand this way, and you could flip the bat and put it around her finger and kind of have her, like, holding the bat as well. So there's a couple of different little gimmicks that you can play with that, and it's just a little cool thing that you can do. And of course, she comes with the bat. Minor detail, but really cool when you really get to, like, have a character like this and you get to look her over. I like that she has the gauntlet here, but the rings here, and these are different on both sides. It's just a minor thing, but it is actually really cool, and it's nice to be able to kind of admire those details in the costume design. She does come with these really cool 2 daggers. They could have significant stories behind them. I don't know. As I told you before, I read her sparingly. She has these, like, extreme posing hands, which could very well be... I've seen different comics where she does, like, these crazy scratches. Like, her hands are ridiculous. She can scratch through, like, steel, and, like, I've seen her cut through car doors and stuff like that with her hands like this. So that's probably part of what that's about, why they give her those hands, aside from the fact that they are just kind of cool. And then, of course, she has gripping hands, and the gripping hands, of course, are perfect for holding the daggers. She does come with a cape, which is just a black cape outside, red cape inside, very much Dracula kind of thing. And also, she comes with a second head, a very different kind of facial expression. And as you can see, the hair. So with this head, basically, you pop the head, we'll pull the hair off, then we pop the head, put the new one on, There we go. I've got it on there as far as I could tell. Place the hair back in. Does she not have ears? Yeah, they didn't sculpt ears. That's part of how they're getting away with the head sculpt being what it is. The hair, of course, slips right back on here, goes into place, and then you have this different kind of look for her, where she's very much like screaming and kind of going wild and everything like that. So this is very much the kind of thing that I told you about, where we'd put the other hands on, which doesn't seem like that's any kind of issue at all. Ooh, her hands are sharp. So she could very much... I'm just trying to get a feel for how this works, okay? That's what I'm trying to do here. Nothing too severe, nothing crazy. We'll put the dagger in her hand. And there. Much more serious kind of look about her. Very much this kind of action. You can have her kind of running and everything like that. And if I wanted to do, her legs very much have a lot of movement as well. Her legs have more movement than anything, if you want the truth of it. But that's her. It's cool. Like, she works. She's Vampirella. She'll be on the shelf. And she's very comparable to the other one in the line that I already have, which is the Red Sonja. And, just so happens, that Vampirella and Red Sonja have actually shared comic book time together. So, I mean, that works very, very well. All in all, for right now, all I need is for her to have her natural look, and I'll be more than happy. All I need is a solid look at the figure, and I've got it. With that, I can now start wrapping this one up. So I've got a pretty decent look at the loose collector's Vampirella. That's my first base here. I knew that I wanted this when I very first seen it. I'd already bought the Red Sonja. It made sense to test another in the line. I liked the Red Sonja. I also needed to see just how different one figure from the next would be, because oftentimes you get two males in the line, especially when they're early, there's a ridiculous amount of reuse. This is also normally true for the female figures. Normally there's a ridiculous amount of reuse, and you can easily tell that they just reused the body, reused the cavity, reused this. As far as I could tell, there's not a whole lot of that going on. Like, I did not do a direct comparison, but I can look at my Red Sonja right up there and I can tell you they are not the same body. Now, this line has been going for a while. Maybe just because the two that I picked don't have that much reuse, if any at all. Maybe that's not necessarily something special or unique to the line. Maybe constantly it's new stuff. Or maybe Vampirella reuses a whole bunch of stuff within her arms and hands and things like that that we've already seen in the rest of the line. Because this line, as far as I've been able to see, does some heavy metal stuff. Like Heavy Metal 1 I've seen, and I've seen a couple of other figures here and there. I think, is it Purgatory or whatever that I've seen? I've seen a couple of figures, is what I'm saying. And the more that I see from this line, especially with like Vampirella and seeing that she had the two different, like, those are things that you can't really necessarily fake on another character. Like, you can't reuse another person's forearm if that forearm has to have that gauntlet. So, makes me feel like there's probably a reason that a lot of these are costing like $80, $90, is because every figure is probably very much sculpted reusing most of the same methods, but not most of the same parts, is what I'm trying to say. I don't know. I can't judge the line. I can't judge the line that harshly, or maybe even that fairly yet, because I simply don't know enough about it. But it does seem like I'm off to a solid start here. This Vampirella seems really solid. And I know this one might sound surprising, but I feel like one of the only real flaws of this figure is that the costume may be too skimpy. Now, I know that sounds crazy, because this is a character that very much is known for a very skimpy costume, but it almost seems like this figure went out of its way to trim it down even more than normal. Like, I know that she normally wears very little. Her normal costume is designed in a way that reveals a lot. But what I'm saying is that it seems like Executive Replica, Loose Collector, went out of their way to make it as thin as they possibly could. And even if you look at some of the artwork, that's not necessarily right. Will the Frazetta girls do a better job at sticking more towards that? Could you argue that depending on the artist depends on how much of the costume actually exists? Yeah, that's fair. And every figure is an artist interpretation as well, an artistic example of something. So it's open to interpretation, and some people are going to like one, and some people are going to like the other. I right now don't know which one I'm choosing. More than likely, I will keep this one because it will photograph well next to my Red Sonja, and it will work pretty well for some of the things that I have in mind. Other than that, I don't have a lot left to say about this one. I'm eager to see the next and get an idea for how that one goes. And then I'm eager to do the video where we put them together and we really figure it out. Which one does the better Vampirella? Because right now there are two very good Vampirellas that are on the market that you can get. Both of them in about the exact same price range. Which one do you spend $80 on? Well, join me on the next video and we'll figure out how Frazetta girls pulled it off. Better? Worse? I don't know. I'm gonna get out of here. I have spoken. Take what you will from it.